If you're looking to turn your idea into a working business with paying customers, this mini-series is for you. Whether you are an entrepreneur with an idea but no clear roadmap, or even a founder with no tech skills who is struggling to simply build the first version of your product, over the next 5 videos I will teach you exactly how to take your idea from a concept to a working minimal viable product and land your very first customer. Now I'm going to lay out everything that I have learned from building my own tech company called Staceco, all with no coding skills. We managed to scale Staceco well over 50,000 euros per month. We work with global 2000 companies to find housing for their working employees, and we managed to win a $156,000 grant from the government without even having an incorporated company, and we were fortunate enough to being coached by multiple serial entrepreneurs. Quite frankly, it was a life-changing experience, and the video we are able to see right now on screen is actually the documentation video that we recorded when we had the 2-day event where we had to pitch and compete against over 300 other startups for the grant that I have just mentioned. Now it actually doesn't matter into which category you fit into, whether you have technical skills, whether you don't have technical skills, or whether you are even a solo entrepreneur. When starting a startup or tech-enabled company, it is very easy to get lost in things that actually don't matter. It's very easy to waste a lot of money, and it's very easy to spend a lot of time doing stuff that is just destined to fail. And even though the above looks like the perfect outcome, I went through many of those issues myself. And my goal is to give you all the nitty-gritty stuff that I learned from the last 7 years and that I learned from being fortunate enough to being coached by serial entrepreneurs. And no, there will be no $997 course at the end of this, because this mini series is just simply the entire course. And I genuinely want to help people. I want to build an audience that actually finds real value in what I have to share, and by binge watching this series you are already helping me tremendously. So in this video I will actually cover 3 main things: the entrepreneur's journey, what it really means to go from an idea to the first paying customer by talking about the 3 inflection points, and I will give you an overview of the 5 steps involved to bring you from an idea to your very first customers. Now, if you're like me, you're potentially not only starting a startup just to make money. And of course, I was also guilty of some of the luxury pleasures, as you can see here on the 2 images. But I also started a startup to leave my mark on the world. And personally, I think it's very nice to be able to say one day, hey, I just built a successful company. It's very nice to be able to work on your own terms. And it's also very nice to be your own boss. But most importantly, I'm not going to be wasting your time and telling you that it's going to be easy. Nor did I have an easy path, but I'm also not hiding it from you either. For the last 7 years, I have been doing nothing else than working or building various different companies. Now I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a background of myself so that you can decide whether it's worth your time to watch this video. Around 2005, I moved to a country called Luxembourg, a very small country next to Belgium, France, and Germany. I had to quickly adapt and learn 4 additional languages growing up. Now, apart from Portuguese, I had to learn Luxembourgish, French, German, and English. Now, fast forward to when I was a teenager, we had to go through a hard time. My mom went through a divorce and we had quite some financial difficulties. We had so many times the bailiff in front of the door, and sometimes we were even a few weeks without hot running water because we could just simply not pay the bills. And at that time, I always went very early every single day to the gym so that I could actually take a warm shower. In the same period, I was going through a rough time in school. I never had the best grades, and in general I had a very hard time finding meaning in what they were always preaching. Get good grades, get a job, save a little bit of money, and that's it. Your intelligence was basically defined by a number on a piece of paper, which I didn't agree at all. Now for me right there, that was actually my turning point. I went into a very big personal development phase. I started reading a lot of self-help books, I started meditating, I started taking a lot of personality tests to just in general learn more about myself and try to develop myself as well. Now, after trying various different things out in 2018, that was the very first time I had the taste of success. So I was running back then my agency, and I started working with known YouTubers, and I also worked with a very big supplement company in general. For me, it was very clear that I did not want to run an agency forever, and that it only was a vehicle to bring me forward and make some cash, which allowed me to help my mom and pay off a few bills. Now, after running my agency for 3 years, I was ready for my next adventure. This next adventure was basically becoming a partner at a company that was managing over 50 apartments in Luxembourg Luxembourg, we were renting them on the short-term market and publishing them on Airbnb and Booking.com. That was a business that at some point was pulling in over $1 million in revenue. Unfortunately, things don't always turn out as expected, and the number of shares that I got offered did not meet my expectations. Now this brings me to the year 2022, which was when I asked Alec, which is now my co-founder, if he would like to found with me Staceco, or let's say Devue, which was our name before we rebranded. Alec was just someone I just had met and shared a very good connection with. I pitched him the idea and he decided to drop out of university to join me on this venture. A few months later in the summer that same year, after working for months on refining our project and creating a pitch, we then decided to apply for the biggest accelerator program in Luxembourg. In October 2022, we were selected from over 300 startups from around the globe, and we got the opportunity to compete against about 60 other startups for a chance to win a grant of up to $156,000 and 6 months of coaching from industry experts. We had to pitch 4 minutes in front of a jury. Little did we know that we would end up being selected among other 15 startups. And here you can actually see a video, which was actually our very first company event. Now this was obviously a very condensed version of the whole story, but along the way you face many ups and downs as an entrepreneur and you make many mistakes. Now I want to take everything that I have been fortunate enough to learn in all these years and share it with you. And this brings me to the very first point that I want to cover in this video, which is the entrepreneur's journey. What separates an experienced entrepreneur from a beginner is just simply testing, learning and failing fast, as you can see right here. Now most people look at this process and think, oh no, I need to generate hundreds of thousands of business ideas in order to be successful, but that's actually not true. Failing or learning doesn't mean your whole idea is shit. It can simply mean that the path you have chosen to execute on this idea might just simply not be the right one. This is all part of the process, and learning from these failures is what will eventually help you build a successful business. So let's say you have a broad business idea. Actually, within that broad business idea, you have multiple paths that you can take to execute the specific idea. Not all paths will lead to a successful business with paying customers. The most important thing is that you gotta learn from it, go back, adjust a little bit, and take a different path until it leads to a successful business with paying customers. And if we have a look at an example, let's say you sell a subscription box for healthy snacks and you decide to focus on exotic superfoods with a high price. You take that path, you hit a dead end, and you decide to learn from it. Ask for feedback and you notice that all the customers actually wanted affordable mainstream healthy snacks. So you go back, you take your learnings with you and you take a new path. And the new path is actually offering a broader variety of accessible snacks at an affordable price, which then might lead to successful business with paying customers. So this is obviously an oversimplification, but all in all, what I'm trying to say is that a new idea is not necessarily a new entire business, which also illustrates what this is supposed to mean. Go from an idea, test it, learn fast, and go back to a new idea and test it again. Doing this as fast as possible is what ultimately separates very experienced entrepreneurs from beginner ones. Now, like I mentioned, this is an oversimplification, which brings me to the second point of this video. This theory is all nice and sweet, but how do you actually apply this in real life? Now, in order to understand what it really takes to go from an idea to having a business with a working product / software and paying customers, we need to talk about the 3 inflection points framework. Now, you're probably here with an idea and a few assumptions. Now, again, oversimplification, your goal is to have a business with paying customers. Now, at all times, you should follow a framework like this. And I divided this into 2 sections. So when you start and going back to this circle, you need to have an idea, test, learn, and go at it again. So that's essentially exactly what you are going to do as a very first step. You're going to focus on customer discovery, aka idea validation. You're going to talk to as many potential customers as possible, and you're going to present whatever you are offering. And you're going to look for specific signs telling you that you should invest even more time and money into creating your very first version of your product, which is nothing else than the MVP, or in other words, the minimal viable product. So essentially, all you are doing right here is you start with your path, if we go back to the other diagram, and you are testing if it is working, if it is the right path. Now, let's assume you don't get very positive feedback, you don't get the right signs. Then you will decide to pivot. And that's exactly what you do. Like in the circle, you actually hit a dead end, you took the wrong path, you need to learn from it. So we write it down, learn, go back and start again and take a new path. So let's assume at the second try, you do get the positive signs that we talked about. Now you invest more time and energy and money into building your very first version of your product. Now in the second stage, you will try to get your very first customer. And inevitably, every entrepreneur will face at some point the 3 inflection points. So having positive signs and moving from customer discovery and idea validation to MVP and building the product out, even though the signs were positive, it doesn't mean that you will have 100% sure actual paying customers. Now, in case you do not get paying customers, at some point you will have to decide whether you should kill that business because it's just simply not worth anymore to invest even more time and money into it. Now, if you do get a lot of first customers, you potentially are facing those 2 decisions here, which is either you decide to continuously bootstrap the business and potentially at some point turn it into a cash flow or a small medium-sized business, or you even decide to go the fundraising route and hunt for a certain valuation. Only once you completed one cycle like this, which is usually very early stage still, you then come across these 3 questions if we would continue the timeline like this. Then we are talking about, how do I achieve product market fit? Do you fundraise and do you have what it takes, or does your startup has what it takes to fit the criteria of VCs? And you will try to analyze whether it's actually better to bootstrap or not. Now, this also again sounds very easy, but the huge issue here is when you fall into the beginner's trap. And as a beginner, you tend to just skip a lot of parts of the process. You have a bunch of back and forth because you skip a lot of parts of the process, and there is no real evaluation and decision making based on actual results, which leads to basically you trying to skip this because you think your solution is definitely needed and there's for sure this problem. So you skip the customer discovery, you go straight into creating your first version of your product, you invest all your money and time into it, and then you try to get your first customer. However, you do not get very good feedback, so you return again, you try to adapt a few things, and you go back again, and eventually you realize that you skipped this crucial process, you go back again, and all in all, once you're finished, you lost at least 18 months. And to be honest, I'm not just saying this and inventing this is actually something that, quite honestly, we did wrong at the beginning. We went straight into selling our product, which is one of the biggest mistakes, because in the very first scenario, your mindset should be about learning and discovering, and only in the second stage, your mindset should switch a little bit to actually selling and making money, even though you still need to learn here. But here in this stage, you should not even have this kind of mindset that now you will make money and you already know what your problem is all about. Now, if we compare this to the experience path, this is what in an ideal world should take you in terms of time to go through the whole cycle. You have an idea, you do customer discovery, you get the right signs, you focus on the MVP, your first version of the product, you try to get your first customers. If that's successful, you take one of those 2 decisions. If it's not successful, you potentially kill it. Before here, you have a second opportunity, because the risk is quite high that when you start to do a customer discovery, aka idea validation, that you have to adapt a little bit and pivot from the learnings and from the feedback you get from the market. That's why I have here 6 to 9 months instead of just calculating 3 and 3, which is 6. Let's assume realistically it can go to 9 months in case you do have to pivot once. But an experienced entrepreneur will most probably not do this 100,000 times and lose a lot of time on a business that is basically just losing money and time. Now, if you compare the experienced path with the beginner's path, you will actually notice that an experienced entrepreneur will be at the very least twice as fast as the beginner and lose much less time, and therefore be able to test most probably 2 times as many overall business ideas than the non-experienced entrepreneur. Now, obviously, in order to go from the start to having a business with paying customers, you need to execute properly on this type of framework. However, that is more simple said than done. So there are a few steps involved, which is specifically what this mini series is about. It focuses on the 5 steps that, in my opinion, you need to take to properly execute this framework without wasting a lot of money, without wasting a lot of time, and without building something that is just simply destined to fail from the beginning on because you didn't take your decisions based on results. Now, this is exactly what we will cover in this mini series. Episode 1 will be focusing on idea validation. We will talk about market research and how to do customer discovery. We will talk about how to pre-sell your idea to see if it's worth to pursue and even if there is real demand. And we will also talk about business foundation, where we touch upon setting goals. We will talk about legal basics. Obviously, I'm not a legal advisor, but I will just tell you what we had to go through and focus on and pay attention to. And we'll also talk about a few tools that, in my opinion, most entrepreneurs can make use of it. In episode 2, we will talk about build your MVP the smart way. We will touch upon what is an MVP, a minimal viable product, and also how to focus on building what matters most. We will talk about building quickly and cheaply, touching upon no-code tools and also the tech stack we are actually using in our own software company, and also how to iterate based on feedback. This episode will specifically be for non-tech and tech people, as I'm sure both of you will be able to benefit from this episode. In episode 3, I will show you how to find your first team member and delegating work. We'll talk about how to find co-founders and freelancers to be able to outsource some of the work that is just simply one of your weaknesses, so that you have more time to focus on your strengths. We'll talk about how to delegate effectively and also how to assess if they are a good fit to join your team. In episode 4, I will talk about finding and getting your first paying customer. I will talk about lead generation, pricing strategies, and also touch upon sales process and a few scripts from our company. Now in episode 5, we will talk about how to evaluate your results you have been getting so far and also to make the tough calls. We will touch upon when to pivot, we will talk about when to keep going and building, and we will compare bootstrapping and fundraising from what I have learned over the last 7 years. Hopefully by the time you are watching this, I already released the very first episode, so you can click somewhere in this video to go and watch it. Before you head off to watch the very first episode of this mini-series, I encourage you to grab your own copy of the visual roadmap down below that will guide you from an idea to your very first customer and will act as a step-by-step checklist to help you stay on track. Thank you for watching.